welcome everyone to Pine Hill Cemetery, which opened in 1867. The original 20 acres was a bequest from the estate of the late Ralph Plum, early merchant in Lodi and extensive landholder in this area. He died in 1865, and when his estate was settled, 20 acres was donated to the village for Pine Hill Cemetery. Of all the people who were laid to rest here, there's one of them is particularly notable because of the manner in which he met his demise. His name was Charles W. Blackney. He was born in Perrysburg in 1846, the son of Nathan Blackney and Sarah Ann Leonard. The family moved to Gowanda when Charles was 5, and he was educated at the Gowanda Union School. He worked as a clerk in his father's grocery store on West Main Street, and also in the hardware store of Salu and Popple until 1867, when he began studying law in the office of Frank Newell in Gowanda. He continued his studies in the office of William Woodbury, who later became Cattaraugus County Judge, and was admitted to the bar in 1870. The following year, he purchased the law library of Mr. Newell and began his own law practice. Blackney was a young man with bright prospects and considered a rising star in the legal profession. He was elected Persia Town Clerk in 1867. He served as Justice of the Peace and was elected Town Supervisor in Persia in 1873 and 1874. In 1874, he ran for District Attorney of Cattaraugus County on a Democratic ticket, but was defeated. He was a delegate to the Democratic State Convention in 1874. On September 9th, 1875, the people of Gowanda and vicinity were thrown into an intense state of excitement over an incident that occurred not far from here. Charles was asked by a client to draw up some legal papers and to bring them to his house the following morning. This client was very particular to tell Blackney to go by way of the Rosenberg schoolhouse, saying he didn't want anyone to know about the visit. So Charles left Gowanda about 8 o'clock in the morning, driving a open horse-drawn buggy. He drove up the Zor Road to the Rosenberg Corners, at the corner of Zor Road and South Quaker. He turned right at the schoolhouse, past Pine Grove Cemetery, proceeding south on South Quaker. He was seen about 9 o'clock passing the Becker farm near where the Vale Road intersects South Quaker, and he started down the hill which leads to Cattaraugus Creek and what we know as the John Lilly farm. Soon after, Mrs. Becker and a guest heard several gunshots ring out and the cry of murder. They gave the alarm to a group of men who were thrashing in a field nearby. Two neighbors, Mrs. Rosenberg and Mrs. Bridges, also heard the shots and saw Blackney staggering forward, but they assumed him to be just some drunk on the road. The men ran to the spot where they found him sitting on the ground, bracing himself up with his hands. He told them he had been shot several times and taken to a doctor. When asked who assaulted him, Blackney said it was Louis Darby, the man he was supposed to meet, and who lived at the bottom of the hill on South Quaker, in what some of you may remember as the Lester Lilly property. Blackney said that as soon as he got to the curve in the road at the bottom of the hill, Darby, who had been hiding in some bushes, jumped on the back of the buggy and shot him twice. Blackney either jumped or fell to the ground, where Darby then emptied his revolver on him and struck him repeatedly in the back of the head with a hammer until he was satisfied or frightened away. Quickly, Mr. Rosenberg started for a doctor, while the other men picked Charlie up and took him to the Becker home, where he passed out. But he regained consciousness briefly when his wife arrived. According to witnesses, he was able to acknowledge his wife's presence Then he relapsed into unconsciousness, from which he did not revive. 2 doctors arrived, but to no avail, and Charles Blackney died at 11:15 a.m. As soon as the news reached town, the excitement became intense and crowds flocked to the scene of the murder. The Gowanda Gazette of September 11, 1875, reported that had Darby been within their reach, there was not much doubt but what he would have been lynched. So strong was the feeling against him. With the arrival of men from town, several of them started for the home of Alanson Darby, a brother of Lewis, with whom he resided. One of the men, Mike Kennedy, was met at the door by Alanson Darby, who said that Lewis had gone upstairs. The men told Alanson to go upstairs first, as Lewis might shoot at anyone attempting to take him into custody. There, one of the men, Will Charlesworth, followed Alanson, and peeking through the stair railing, saw Lewis Darby lying on the floor. Then the men rushed up the stairs and found Lewis lying face down in a pool of blood, with his throat cut from ear to ear. He apparently had lain down on the bed, which was now soaked with blood, cut his own throat, after which he rolled off onto the floor, where he was discovered. A revolver was found in his coat pocket. The motive for this heinous crime was unclear, but later it was revealed that it may have been the result of an old grudge that Lewis Darby had held against Charles Blackney for 12 years, since they were 17 years old. Classmates of both the men recalled a schoolyard quarrel that erupted into blows, and Darby received quite a whipping from Blackney. It was a disgrace that Lewis Darby had never forgotten, and this grudge resulted in a double tragedy. It is said that Darby often remarked about this beating and had never given up the notion of settling the score. It was believed by some that Lewis Darby was insane. His brother said that he had not been acting right for some time. Their sister, Mrs. Hill Crandall, noticed it too. The morning of the murder, he came downstairs about 5 a.m., crying for no apparent reason. He told his brother lately several times that he didn't have much longer to live. When Lewis entered the house after committing the crime, he acted very strange. His hands were bloody, and he told his sister-in-law that he had been helping move a thresher and had cut his hand. That was the last time he was seen alive. Charles Blackney's funeral was held on September 12, 1875, from the Methodist Episcopal Church on North Chapel Street. He left a widow, the former Alice Stewart, who survived until 1919. That concludes this stop on the tour. If you want to proceed up the hill to the next section over, you will meet Daniel Green Garnsey from way back in the 19th century.